Hello, my name is John Reynolds. Welcome to Extraordinary Life Stories. On this episode, I'm talking with Mark Ormrod MBE. Mark is a former Royal Marines commander, an author, motivational speaker, a father of three, proud trustee of the Reorg charity, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belt, and the UK's most successful Invictus Games athlete. Mark joined the Royal Marines in 2001 at the age of 17 and served in the Iraq War in 2003. In 2007, he suffered catastrophic injuries, resulting in the amputation of both his legs above the knee and his right arm above the elbow. Mark's been awarded the Pride of Britain Award as well as an MBE. I'm really looking forward to talking with Mark, so let's get into it. Mark, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Been looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too.
Tell me, who's Mark Ormrod?
Wow, who is Mark Ormrod? Well, I'm a former Royal Marines commando. Joined the military at 17 straight from school. I'm a father of three. I am a personal development, not addict, but fan. I'm an adaptive athlete. And in terms of, what I do for a profession and a career now, I would encompass it all under the banner of entrepreneur.
Yeah, well said. Yeah. Captured everything. Let me take you back to a young Mark growing up and what you actually wanted to do and those aspirations and early influences that shaped your career.
Yeah, I think like a lot of young teenagers, I didn't really know exactly what it was that I wanted to do. Now you got to bear in mind, when I was a teenager, probably the same as you, the internet didn't exist. So it was a lot more challenging to find information about potential careers and paths after school. But I grew up with a lot of friends who were older than I was, who had already left school and gone into careers, gone on to university and that kind of thing. And when I was about 15 and a half, I kind of had this epiphany that in about 6 months, once I'd done my exams, I had to have that choice made. Did I want to go to college, to uni, or did I want to go out into the big bad world?
Life was happening.
Exactly, yeah. And I didn't like school, I didn't dislike school. I'm not particularly academic. And when I looked at all my friends who had already left, a lot of them had joined the military.
Sure.
And when they came home on their leave periods, they were always saying about these, fitness tests that they'd done and these weapons that they'd played with and tanks that they'd driven and all these kind of things. And they always seemed to have money. They always seemed to be super fit and super strong.
Yeah.
And I kind of gravitated towards that, just naturally. It felt like a natural way for me to go.
Yeah.
And so I got my friend, John, who was in the army, serving in Germany. He was home on leave. We went to the Armed Forces Career Centre and spoke to the army recruiter. I still hadn't turned 16 yet. So I had to take the paperwork home for my parents to sign. And I found out then that I had an uncle who was in the Royal Marines. So that weekend I went up to visit him. He only lived about 25 minutes from my house.
Cool.
I had a good sit-down conversation with him about the difference between the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Royal Marines.
Yeah.
Went back to the career centre on the Monday morning, spoke to the Royal Marine recruiter. He put the VHS in, and that's how long ago it was. And I watched his recruiting video of these men that I had never heard of doing what I thought were incredible things. And I think my jaw must have hit the floor in front of this guy. And literally from that moment on, that was it. That was all I wanted to do.
That's interesting. So there was a mentor element there, someone that could actually give you a kind of been there, done that, and sort of previous. And then a really inspirational kind of video of people inspiring you to want to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I grew up as a big action movie fan as well.
Yeah.
So I kind of tied the two together and thought, all right, this is me. I want to be a soldier, not just a soldier. I want to join the elite and see if I've got what it takes physically and mentally to do that, and then spend the rest of not my life but my career doing the kind of things that my uncle talked to me about. Traveling the world and having an adventure. Yeah,
I get that totally. And I think having had conversations with you in the build up to talking to you today, that there's an element of the fact that you were always up for pushing yourself. I think you were 85 kg when you were 14.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I think you told me that. And so you're a big lad. And so from a jiu-jitsu point of view, which you got into, you then are having to roll with with men. So you're instantly, up against it from from an adversity point of view, from such a young age, going into the Marines at 17. Yeah. That seems to be a constant with you.
Yeah, when I was a teenager, it was actually full contact kickboxing and Muay Thai I did.
Right.
So jiu-jitsu would have been better, but I was actually this was striking sports,
right?
And because I was so big, I had to compete against men. And the funny thing is, I didn't know it at the time, but it's not until I looked back and reflected. I had 11 fights. I won 10, lost 1. But every time I competed, I had this natural mindset of, I've already won. This is just a process. Step through the ropes, beat this guy, and not in a overconfident or arrogant way. Just it felt natural to me. I was confident in my abilities, and then that came to pass. I'd go in and I'd beat the odds, and I didn't know what I was doing, developing this resilience. As I was going, and so joining the Royal Marines was that next step.
Yeah,
it just excited me to see if my body could handle it, if my mind could handle it.
It's a challenge.
Absolutely, but I started to know that consciously do that at that point. Yeah. Prior to that, it was just unconscious. I was just doing things what I thought were cool and seeing if I had what it took. But then joining the military, I was locked in and focused. I'm like, okay, this is a whole other level. I need to really focus in on this and push myself farther than I've ever pushed myself to see if I can do this.
Fair play. I think that there's a continuity there where having that challenge to overcome adversity, any obstacle that's put in front of you is I'm going to knock it over and I'm going to send it. And I guess with what happened to you in 2007, and tell me about the accident, ultimately you were then prepared in context of what had gone before to be prepared for resilience. Yeah. It must have helped you massively. But do tell me, tell us what happened in 2007.
So I was successful in becoming a Royal Marine. By the time I turned 18, I finished my training in November 2001, which was just after 9/11. So we went straight from training into combat. I was in Iraq when I was 19. I left for a short period, took a bit of time out, rejoined, and went to Afghanistan in 2007 for a 6-month tour. And halfway through that tour, on Christmas Eve, I was out as second in command of an 8-man patrol. And on the way back into our camp, when we were just about to finish up, we were given protection for another group of men. So the other 7 men in the section had taken fire positions. I was the last one to take mine. And as I walked over to it and I went to get on my stomach, I put my knee on the floor and I knelt on and detonated an improvised explosive device, which instantly took off both my legs, eventually above the knee, and my right arm above the elbow. So not the tour that I'd envisioned. No. It was a pretty traumatic Christmas, but because I was with some other extremely professional, courageous, and brave individuals, that they got me out of there very, very quickly. Right. Did everything they needed to do.
So they ultimately saved your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Patched me up, gave me morphine, got me out of there, got me to safety, got me to a helicopter with medical professionals. They then brought me, I had died as the helicopter landed. I was declared clinically dead. They then revived me using a technique that hadn't even been theorized before. So basically they couldn't get intravenous lines into me because my veins had collapsed.
Right.
And the alternative to that, which had only been given the green light to use 3 days before, was to drill into a tibia and a fibia and administer fluid that way.
So it's pioneering.
Yeah.
They were learning on you.
Right, but I didn't have any tibias or fibias because of the explosion.
Right.
So they're on the back of a helicopter trying to figure out how we're going to get fluids into this guy. So 2 of the medics, Charlie and Millsy, decided to drill into the front and back of my hip bone. Yeah. They said the first time it didn't work because the skin wasn't tight enough. So they corrected the issue, went back in, the line bit, the fluids went in, and they said 3 minutes later I was awake and responsive and coherently answering the questions that they were asking me. Wow. Yeah, it was pretty insane. And then they flew me back to a field hospital, a place called Camp Bastion. The surgeons had a look at the damage because there were traumatic amputations. It was pretty awful to look at. And they then decided that the only way they were going to be able to save my life is if they amputated both my legs above the knees and my right arm above the elbow.
I'm interested in context of how conscious you were of what your injuries were, and the person I know that was ultimately facing forward. That, you know, it's a challenge. I mean, my God, it's a challenge. The reason why I asked this is I had the pleasure of meeting a guy called David Butler, who is a triple amputee. He found this thing resting on a fence panel. He's in his late 70s now, but an 11-year-old lad sees this thing on a fence, intrigued, goes to pick it up, and it's heavy, and he drops it, and it's an unexploded mortar from the bomb.
Oh, wow.
Blows up. Okay. Now, it blew both his legs and both his arms off. But the bit that I found fascinating about him was in the aftermath, straight afterwards, he knew that one of his arms could be saved. And he knew that was a way of him being able to have a life, 11 years old, a life that he could then do stuff up. I've got one active limb. I can potentially, you know, live in some kind of a life that isn't going to be stuck in a wheelchair and so on. How much of that was going through your head? Or were you just dealing with the whole kind of, can't believe this has happened and what happens now sort of thing? How conscious were you of that?
I remember everything up until the moment when the helicopter landed. And then that's when I blacked out, when they classed me as clinically dead. So I remember the explosion. Initially, I didn't know what I'd done. Initially, I thought we were under attack and by rockets, mortars, that kind of thing. So my initial instinct was find where the attack came from and neutralize the threat. I couldn't see anything because of the terrain we were working is very sandy and dusty. So this huge dust cloud was created and I can't see anything.
Sure.
I can hear everybody. And I was listening for like a follow-up attack with AK-47s or something like that. But that didn't come. And then I knew where I was situated, that behind me, about 600 meters beneath where we were, was a small rectangular forestry block, just some trees. So I was trying to turn around because I thought that's the only place that anyone with any sense is going to attack from.
Sure.
And even though I couldn't see, after 4 or 5 times in my mind of saying turn around and, you know, deal with the situation, I knew that my body wasn't moving.
Yeah.
So I waited for this dust cloud to settle. That's when I looked and saw what had happened.
Right.
Then I knew that we weren't under attack. I knew that I had been the guy that had detonated the improvised explosive device. And the thoughts and feelings, I don't think are what you might imagine. So I wasn't scared that I was going to die. Mm-hmm. The thought entered my mind when I looked at everything, but I also knew that those other 7 men would do whatever it took to get me out of there. I had so much confidence in their abilities that I never genuinely thought that I wouldn't survive it. Mm. But guilt and shame, they were my first 2 thoughts. You know, because traditionally what happens, if you stand on an anti-personnel mine, what I stood on was an anti-personnel mine with the warhead of a 107mm Chinese rocket on top. But an anti-personnel mine is designed to blow a foot off. Then the idea is that all your friends come to help you, and then the enemy come over the brow of a hill with AK-47s. So I thought, in my mind, I've put everyone's life in danger now because that's what's going to happen and everyone's going to get killed. And I felt a huge amount of guilt. And then when I realized, and this all happens in seconds.
Sure.
When I realized that wasn't happening, kind of shame kicked in and embarrassment, because I thought, what an idiot. You're the dummy that's gone and triggered an improvised explosive device. Because we all had these conversations before, and we all said, you got to be quite dumb to do it, because surely you'll be able to see where it's been dug in the ground. But we were in this little bowl. Yeah. And I think where it had rained over the days and weeks prior to that, it had smoothed the surface out. So you couldn't see anything. No. And then I immediately started thinking back to the UK. I had my daughter, my eldest daughter, Kezia. She's 19 now. She was 2. Right. And I immediately thought, I'm not going to have a good relationship with her if I survive this, because, you know, I can't go and pick her up from school, because I thought, it's crazy how much you think of in seconds, but I thought she'll get bullied. She'll get picked on because she's got a freak for a dad. So that's done.
So you've instantly made a judgment on
like
yourself.
All within about 4 or 5 seconds this was happening. Wow. Then I thought someone's going to get lumbered with me. Like, I don't know any amputees. You know, what's life like? I'm assuming someone's going to have to look after me. And all these weird thoughts start going through your head, and you don't really think or worry about dying. It's crazy. It was just a lot of guilt, shame, embarrassment, that kind of stuff. And all the while that's happening, you know, the machine's kicking in. The guys are doing what they're tasked to do. The medic's on his way to me. They've got a defensive cordon. Luckily, there wasn't a follow-up attack.
No.
They got me out of there. They had to, you know, part of my leg was still attached. My arm was still attached. They had to scoop that onto my stomach, get me out of this minefield, get me onto a vehicle. As the vehicle was going up the hill to go in the front entrance of our camp, I fell out the back. And the driver, my Sergeant Major Bob, had to swing around and just reach and grab whatever he could grab to hold me in the vehicle. And he ended up grabbing the femur bone that came out of my right leg. I didn't feel any of it because I'd been given morphine, so I was pretty numb to it all at this point. And the last thing I remember is getting to the helicopter landing site, that Chinook landing, the sandstorm that's created from the propeller blades, and then the heat that came out of the exhaust. That's when I blacked out.
All the senses were on full high alert. The way you describe it, you're taking the whole lot in.
And it's very strange. And anyone who's ever, I guess, had a near-death experience, I mean, everyone's experience may be different, but mine was very relaxing, very calm. I just remember feeling more exhausted than I've ever felt in my life. Like completely drained. I couldn't even open my eyes. It took that much effort. But I felt happy. It was strange and relaxed. And I blacked out. And the next thing I know, I wake up 3 or 4 days later in a hospital in the UK.
Gosh, thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
It's amazing listening to you because it's not relaxing hearing it.
Okay.
You know what I mean by that?
You should see the pictures.
Oh. Well, I watched a documentary that showed enough to understand just how blown to pieces you were, you know, and that's without being there, and you kind of, you know. So I know that was massive trauma. Going to that week later in hospital, the thoughts must now change. There's a whole facing forward of, you know, okay, what happens now? What am I able to do? And I know also from talking to you and watching that documentary that there was the moment where you were told you won't walk again. And that you're ultimately potentially going to be in a wheelchair for life. Now, going back to that, Mark, that, you know, if there's a mountain, I'm going to climb it and I'm going to send it, challenge and so on. You know, clearly we know that those two things, you smashed it. Talk to me about that mindset, and also talk to me about the fact that clearly you're so driven, but were there times when you just doubted it or actually had those moments where head in hands going, I'm not sure if I'm going to make this?
The first week was intense because of all in the intensive care, because of the pain relief and medication. I mean, I just spent the whole week hallucinating. You know, I had Will Smith come and visit me in my imagination. Became friends with an 8-foot bottle of ketchup. I had somebody driving a forklift truck around my room, putting ammunition crates on the end of my bed. It was wild the first week, which actually helped me deal with it and take it in as the days progressed. But then when I went upstairs to the Bones and Plastics ward, they had massively reduced the medication, and I was a lot more with it, and I understood what was going on, and I fully understood what my situation was. And I didn't know what to do. You know, I was just trying to be positive for everyone around me. And it was quite false on my part, but I just thought if I just keep trying to be positive, eventually it's going to feel natural. And 3.5 weeks into my recovery, a doctor knocked on the door. He came in, he introduced himself to me. This is February 2008. Yeah. He had been working in the field of amputations at that point for 33 years. And he walked in my room and very matter of fact, had a conversation with me saying, you have no chance of ever walking again. And then went on to explain that he'd never met anybody with just one leg missing above the knee that had any success with prosthetics because they were so difficult to use. They were so painful and they took so much energy. So people just put them in a cupboard and sat in a wheelchair. And I was 24 years old at the time, 3.5 weeks into my recovery, trying to be positive. Yeah. That wasn't what I wanted to hear.
No.
And I'll be very honest with you, I did strongly contemplate suicide at that point because I didn't see a way forward. But about 6 days later, another guy knocked on the door and he walked in to my room wearing a set of prosthetic legs. His name was Mick Brennan, and he had been hit in Iraq in 2005 by a suicide bomber and lost both his legs above the knee. Right. And he spent about 6 hours with me. and he took his legs off, he put them on, he talked to me about the technology, the CPUs, the Bluetooth, the sensors, and all of that kind of stuff. He taught me through his journey from where I was in a hospital bed through to where he was, which at the time he was still in the army. He was a Paralympic hopeful in skiing, and he was a father. So he taught me through all of that. And after about 6 or 7 hours, he left. So I went from, rock bottom to sky high at this point. And I had seen somebody with my own 2 eyes physically doing this.
Yeah.
And I've always been of this mindset of, well, I've seen this. Like, I've seen this guy doing
Visual.
it. There's no reason why I can't do it. All I've got to do is follow very similar processes to what he followed, physically and mentally.
Yeah.
And then surely I'll get similar results.
Yeah.
So I actually got a laptop brought in my room, started doing some research, trying to find other people like Mick around the world. I was looking for someone who was actually a triple amputee.
Yep.
Because it may not seem much, but having lost my dominant arm as well was a whole other ball game. And I just started doing research, looking for inspiration. And then when I went to rehab, I did 6 weeks in hospital. When I went to rehab and was eventually going to be issued with my legs, I wanted to be ready and prepped as much as I possibly could be, just to get the legs and then go. That was my mindset. And it was very quickly changed because it was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. That the first time I put these legs on and walked a set of parallel bars, which is about 5 meters, I was exhausted. It takes 300 to 500% more energy for a bilateral above knee amputee to do anything than it does for an able-bodied person.
Right.
So even though I was fit and young and healthy, I was still fighting off infections. I hadn't trained all these new muscles in my glutes, my lower back, my hips, or anything to deal with this.
Yep.
And I just literally went straight out the gate into the deep end, and it was a mistake.
Okay.
So I knew there was a lot of work to do, but I set myself a goal on the first day I got to rehab because my unit was still deployed.
Yeah.
And I knew when they came back, they would have about 10 weeks off. And then when they came back to our unit in Taunton in the UK, we would have a medals parade. So it's like a big ceremonial thing. Friends and family come from all over the world. A VIP comes and you all form up on the parade ground and get individually presented with your medals.
Yep.
So I set a goal that when that day came around, because everyone was expecting me to be pushed on in a wheelchair, I didn't want that. I wanted to stand shoulder to shoulder with those men that I fought with and get that medal pinned on my chest, stood up. So that's all I focused on for 6, maybe 8 weeks. No, longer than that, a little bit longer than that, of just getting up every day and trying to make 1% progress. 1 more step, 2 more steps. That's all I really focused on. I chunked it right down to make it manageable. And then when I felt good, I pushed myself. And when I didn't feel good, as long as I was 1% better than the day before, that to me was progress.
Yeah.
And it was pushing me towards achieving my goal. And it helped get me up in the mornings. Having that goal helped me get up in the mornings when I was sore and tired and my back hurt, or I just couldn't be bothered.
Yeah.
And I was feeling a bit down. Just knowing, okay, I've only got to do 1%.
Yeah.
And then inevitably you do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8%, and you finish the day feeling great, and you just rinse and repeat.
There's so much to learn from that as well, right? I mean, what you are referring to there is a massive goal to ultimately achieve, but in context of relating that to everybody's everyday life. When we were talking in terms of getting ready to film for today, I was talking about that sort of moment where you just don't feel like doing the workout in the morning, but actually go out and just do the first set of whatever it is, or just get down and do some press ups, and then it starts building the habit. It starts, the brain starts going, okay, you can do another one now. And then before you know it, in context of what you've been through, and just pausing there in that context, there are so many people that will say, oh, my life's so difficult, or I haven't got the time. And yet they'll make the time to watch Love Island or something. And they're not spending the time on their self-development and their own goals and getting to know themselves. What are your thoughts on that? Because there's something there where being inspired by you, where it's just that whole constant, well, I'm going to achieve this and this. I'm not going to try and climb the mountain tomorrow. I've done that and failed, but actually I'm just going to keep going. And that way I'll achieve my goal.
First and foremost, it's about choices. You've got to choose the disciplined path. Yeah. I think when everyone's motivated, like in New Year's, for example, they go out the gate racing and they want to do a million things, and inevitably a couple of weeks later it's overwhelming, it's too much, and they quit. Motivation's temporary. It's discipline that takes over then, and you've got to be disciplined in it, and you've got to consciously make the right choices if you're serious about achieving what it is that you want to achieve.
Sure. But
again, I think not overthinking it is a big thing. Like you say, you just get up and do a little bit, do a little bit, do a little bit, and it compounds. Do a little bit, and a little bit, and then before you know it, you've either achieved what you wanted to achieve, or you're a hell of a lot closer than you were. If you saved £1 every day for a year, you got 365 quid at the end of the year.
Yeah.
It's easy.
Yeah.
If you wanted to lose a pound a week in weight, for example, by the end of the year, I'm not going to do maths. That's not my strong point. But rather than
I'm not going to try and help you either.
rather than try and do it all in a month,
yeah,
just space it out over the course of a year, a little bit at a time. It's more enjoyable.
Be consistent.
Yeah, but it's more enjoyable.
Yes.
And then it becomes part of your lifestyle. Then it just becomes normal. And then before you know it, you're stacking all these positive habits on top of each other, and you're living this life, which, when you reflect on it, even them can feel quite overwhelming. But because you've been patient and consistent and disciplined with the small incremental gains over time, the game changes.
Yes.
Life changes.
Yeah. No, you articulated that really well. And actually, just talking about goals, I'm smiling because we're talking days after you had a chance to meet Arnold Schwarzenegger the weekend just gone, which you talked about the action hero movies and stuff, similar age, right? So, but one of the things that I thought was really awesome when you were telling me about that day wasn't just the opportunity to meet a boyhood hero, but it was the fact that people were coming up to you and saying they'd come to the event to see you, and there's such a humbleness about you. There's a constant drive with you, but actually it sounds like you're starting to realise, perhaps with maturity, maturity since all these things that have happened to you, that actually you are inspiring, you are motivating people, and in the same way that someone came and talked to you at a really difficult time in your life, you're out there and you're showing everyone that actually, do you know what, just keep going and just keep knocking over these milestones.
Yeah.
Tell me about that day and some of the people that may have come up to you and what they said, because that fascinates me.
It was really humbling. I've been to that event 4 years in a row with Rio, the charity that I'm a trustee of. And it was a big fitness expo, and part of what we do is, part of it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, part of it's fitness for the military and the emergency services. Yeah. So this was the 4th year I've been there. And when I get a chance, I'll go for a walk around and see other vendors and events, and there's like CrossFit competitions and strongman and all this. And every time I left the booth to go for a walk, someone would be like shouting, "Mark, Mark." And I ignored it to start with because I thought I must be talking to somebody else. And people would come up and grab me and they'd be like, "Can we get a photo? Can we get a picture? Can you sign this thing for me?" And I'm like, "Sure, if you like." And you got to bear in mind, right? So you had Arnold Schwarzenegger there, Tom Aspinall was there, John Jones was there, the world's strongest man was there, all these legends from bodybuilding were there, and and me. So I would assume they'd all be there and they probably were, trying to get autographs of all these people and pictures of these people. But then another one came, and then another one. And then when I was taking one of the jiu-jitsu seminars, this woman came over with her partner, and they had traveled 2 hours, and she said to me, and it was a really profound moment, and really humbling. She said, "The only reason I've traveled here is to meet you." And I was like, "Why?" But yeah, I mean, to me, all of this right here, social media, I'm just living my life and documenting it, right? Because it's cool and it's fun and I enjoy doing it. You don't realize the impact it has until things like that happen. Yeah. And people come and say, they tell you.
Yeah, I'm glad they are as well. I mean, I'm telling you that right now. I couldn't wait to talk to you today. It's that authenticity. It's you living your life, but actually sharing it as well. And also, I think you're not feeling sorry for yourself. There are people that are going through far less and have gone through far less that are, and I'm not trying to be, there's no preaching here. You know, my God, we all have our own stuff, right? But it's that inspiration where actually, you know what? We've all got our own stuff going on. How can I get through my bit? And listening to people like yourself, where you're giving that advice, you're actually putting it out and saying, well, just take that small step, but do it tomorrow as well. If you miss a day, do it again. And you know, that self-development that came naturally to you pre-2007, let alone everything you do now today, it doesn't necessarily come naturally to some people. They need to hear it, they need to see it. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so I'm really glad people are coming up to you and saying that. Tell me about reorg, and also that importance of connectivity. It's been a key part of the conversation, and the importance of family. You've got. I wonder what would have happened in 2007 if you hadn't had your girlfriend, now wife, there to actually talk to, be there, and actually one of the first things you did was, will you marry me, right? That whole connectivity. But with reorg, tell me what it does, how that's helping people, and how people could get involved as well.
So it was started by a friend of mine who's also a former Royal Marine. He was a physical training instructor. He was the head of Royal Marines Unarmed Combat, and he was a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu nut. And he started using Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to help men like me in the Royal Marines who were physically injured, but also men that were psychologically scarred as well as a result of their service. And it gained a lot of popularity. And it very quickly went from just Royal Marines to tri-service, so Army, Air Force and Navy. And then when Sam was due to leave the Royal Marines, he did a full career of 22 years. He wanted to just give it to another physical training instructor. And I mean, we met in 2017 when he started training me in this, and I fell in love with it instantly because it's so inclusive and you can adapt a lot of stuff. And, as a man from the Royal Marines and being in that kind of environment, sometimes it was nice to have a good scrap, and I thought I'd lost that forever, and he gave that back to me. But me and some of the other guys that trained eventually convinced Sam that when he left the Royal Marines, if he didn't form this into a charity and keep running with it, then a lot of people like me would struggle and suffer without it. So he left and formed it into an official charity. We then went and branched out into the emergency services because, in the military, you have periods, right? When you deploy on conflict and you go through periods of trauma and high activity. The police, the fire brigade, the ambulance, they're doing it every day. Right? So we recognized that, and we had some people reach out that we were working with. So then we widened our spectrum. And then we also realized that not everyone wants to roll around in their pajamas, hugging other men and getting sway. So we went into the functional fitness space as well. And we brought people in that wanted to do CrossFit style workouts and everything. And it's hard for me to explain what it does. Not only is it the physical act of the fitness or the jiu-jitsu, an exercise in your body, that then leads to giving you an increased level of positive mental health. But then there's the community that goes around it too. Do you know what I mean? Because in these organizations, in the military, the emergency services, you create these communities.
Strong camaraderie, right?
Because you're all going through this shared hardship, which is the same as jiu-jitsu. You all start as a white belt, having no idea what you're doing, getting beaten up by 15-year-olds, and then you progress through this journey of failure, success, failure, success, failure, success, until you get to where you want to be. But other people have been on a similar journey, so they get it and they understand it, and it forms these bonds. And so it helped to recreate those communities that I thought I'd lost when I left the military. And that's the feedback that we've had of other people. So it's just like this all-encompassing thing that's good from every angle. And it certainly changed my life. It gave me back something that I thought I'd lost. But on a more serious note, from men and women we've met over the years that we've brought into the reorg family, it saved their lives. Because they've been at rock bottom. And they've seen no other way out. And when we brought them in, had a bit of a roll around with them or give them some sort of fitness program, it's given something back again. It's a brilliant mission.
It's a brilliant mission. I think, love what it's doing and keen to support it in any way. And I think you touched on the community side of things is key. The sort of physical exercise as well as the mental fitness go hand in hand. I'm interested to know whether, a lot of people say you've got to start the day at 5 o'clock and run a marathon and read a book by 8 o'clock kind of thing. Are you an early morning guy and try and get the sort of the fitness in, the mindset right, and the goals set? Is that part of what you do?
That's what works for me. For years now I've got up at 5:15 straight into some sort of meditation. Depends where I am. It's a lot easier for me at home because things are a bit more complicated than just putting my trainers on and going out the door. So if I'm at home, then I'll be either doing jiu-jitsu or some sort of fitness in the morning. It sounds a bit nerdy, but I'd have mapped my day out the night before, so I know exactly what I'm doing. So I'm focused because I live quite a busy life.
I don't think that's nerdy. That's being organised, right? I mean, there's days when I'm not doing it, but most of my days are that way inclined. It's amazing how many people don't do that.
Yes, you need structure. Yeah. Otherwise, you're just all over the place, and other people end up running your day for you. Like, oh, I need this, I need that, and you end up doing all their stuff for them. But when you can say, no, I've got this, I've got a meeting, I've got to do this, do that, then you're in control of your day. But yeah, I'm an early riser. I'm in bed at 10:30 at night.
Yeah.
I wouldn't consider myself a creative person, and what I've found is creative people are like the night owls. They'll stay up writing or doing whatever they do at night. But I like to be warm and cozy, 10:30, early to bed, early to rise.
There's something about that though that tells me that then you've achieved what you needed to and wanted to do out of the day, and you're ready to prepare for the next day, rather than possibly where I can be guilty. I'm quite creative, so I'm still thinking about how's going to get out of the day.
Right.
And it's not that I'm more motivated. It's just like the brain's still spinning. I'm still thinking, what about this? What about that? And I find it difficult to shut down. So we're all different.
Yeah.
You've got there's a number of different I'll call them achievements that you've ultimately had from getting into the Marines. That's a massive challenge in itself. To being awarded an MBE, to not only surviving the 2007 accident but flourishing. If I asked you what your greatest achievement is, what would it be?
I think in terms of my recovery, like since that day, I haven't used a wheelchair since the 9th of June 2009. That doctor said I would never be without a wheelchair. And I flew to America on the 9th of June 2009 to meet a triple amputee and a team of specialists that were going to mentor me and train me for 3 weeks in an intensive environment. Yeah. And I got rid of both my wheelchairs, the manual and the electric, before I flew out there.
So you were mentally, I'm not having it.
I burned the boats. I'm like, right, if they're not there when I get back, I can't use them. When I got there, and by the way, I couldn't do half a day at this point out of my wheelchair because I was in so much pain. But 1%, when I was out there, it was a bit more, another hour, until I got to 3 weeks and I hadn't used a wheelchair. I got home and I thought, let me see if I can do a month. Did the month, and I'm like, well, that's it. And then before you know it, 6 months are gone, a year's gone, 5 years, 10 years. And I haven't touched one since.
Yeah, fair play.
So in terms of recovery, that's absolutely it.
Yeah, and another question that's sort of related to that for me, there's a lot of people that talk about success and failure, and the fact they go hand in hand. You can't achieve success without failing. But sitting here now, with all the maturity and kind of things you've experienced, what's your definition of success?
Living life on your terms, creating the life that you want to live. So whether that's physically, mentally, spiritually, your career, your family, creating what you want, not being forced down a set route. No. You know what I mean? Yeah, and it takes 100%. A lot of, we talked about this offline as well. I don't think enough people generally spend enough time working on themselves and figuring it out. Like, you're in school and you're told, learn this, do this exam, get a good job, work in a company, retire at 60, and no one really knows who they are. I don't think enough people spend enough time working on it. No. And I dove straight into that when I was in hospital with not much to do, except read books and watch seminars online. Spent a lot of time working on me, trying to figure that out. And now I live a life that I want to live, that's leading me to where I want it to lead me to.
It's so inspiring to hear that. And I think something really interesting there for me, and actually I can relate it to David Butler, who I mentioned earlier, the triple amputee. He told me a story where in the hospital ward, similar to you, where he was being told things by doctors and wasn't going to be the case, he was going to beat it and so on. And he made friends with the nurses that became friends for life, and he started, ultimately use that word flourishing. But he watched as two kids that had crept into the lion enclosure at Whipsnade Zoo, couldn't see the lions, so they went in. The lions had seen them. They go in, and then the lions charged them. And one of the kids didn't get out, and it took both this lad's arms off at the shoulder. And he said, I went to this lad and I was trying to comfort him and so on. And he said, I watched him die. He didn't die of his injuries. He died mentally. And just flipping that back to you when you're in hospital and those thoughts of, right, I'm going to overcome this and so on. It does feel like some people have got that whole, I'm going to beat this, I'm going to send it, I'm going to find inspiration. Other people, and I'm relating this to normal life as well, just seem to give up. But that power of what we can control in our mind is massive, isn't it? But I don't think people are aware of what they're capable of. You know, look at what you've achieved in terms of from the accident to be, you drove yourself here. You know, you get yourself up in the morning, no one's telling you to get up and ultimately helping you. You know, what would you say to someone that is struggling with that kind of, you know, motivation and your experience of what we really are capable of?
Find some inspiration. I think what we do, rightly or wrongly, is we put people on pedestals. We see somebody who's achieved something great, whether it's an athlete, a businessman, a woman, an actor, whatever, and we put them on a pedestal. You don't really know their backstory. And this is why we talk about Arnold Schwarzenegger. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I loved him as a kid for his movies, but when I read his autobiography and found out about his past and everything like that, and how he was super successful before he even stepped on a movie set, you know, that's kind of what lit me up, and it made me think what all of us as human beings are capable of achieving if we, I think, surround ourselves with the right kind of people, commit to our goals, and don't have any excuses. You know, like, failure is such a manufactured load of rubbish. Like, and this is when I talk to people and they have that fear of failure. I always use the same analogy. Like, imagine if when you're a baby and you start learning to walk and you take that first step and you fall on your bum and everyone goes, you know what, maybe this walking thing's not for me. And they just quit because they failed. Then we'd all be crawling around the planet, right? But they don't know that because they haven't been exposed to, you know, the negative side of failure. And they get up and they try again, they laugh and giggle, and then eventually, guess what? They're walking and they're successful. True. You know, but we just we fail at that first hurdle and go, maybe I'm not good enough. You know, human beings can do incredible things. Yeah. You know what I mean? You got to get the right people around you that are gonna bring that out of you.
That's key. That's key. And it sounds like at certain times in your life, there have been people there when you've needed, and I imagine there's a big part of you with reorg and just the personality you are that will give back, you know, ultimately looking to see if we can help. And I think that was the key, like, for you to achieve that boyhood dream of meeting Arnie. And actually even the story you told me where you woke up early and you thought, well, I'm up now, I'll get there early. And by default, that actually gave you the opportunity to have time that wasn't scheduled. But then to flip that to the conversation we had where people were coming up to you and wanting to meet you, and so they've been inspired. But I think those authentic stories of people that have achieved something they're aspiring to or struggling in their lives, people are hunting that out now. You know, and that's been a key thing for me. I could talk to you for a lot longer, but we've run out of time. But you've massively inspired me. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.